This near-death experience story is sent by Pope Gregory, a 70-year-old man who spent his entire life serving the Church and guiding others in faith. But in 2025, a near-fatal event changed everything he believed about Jesus and the afterlife. What he saw, felt, and understood during those few moments beyond life shattered his old beliefs and revealed a truth that had been hidden for centuries. His journey beyond death wasn't just peaceful, it was enlightening in a way that no religious text had ever described. What did Jesus show him? Why did he return? This is his astonishing story. It was an ordinary morning when Pope Gregory suddenly collapsed in his private study. His vision blurred, his breathing became shallow, and his heart rate slowed. He felt an overwhelming weakness take over his body, and within moments, he slipped into unconsciousness. But instead of sinking into darkness, he felt an immediate sense of lightness, as if his soul was being lifted from his physical body. The pain vanished, and in its place came an unfamiliar sense of calm. It was then that he realized he was no longer inside his body. He was witnessing his own form lying lifeless on the floor. He expected fear, but what he felt was freedom. He saw his body surrounded by people rushing to revive him, but their voices were distant, like whispers in a dream. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. Then, something incredible happened. A radiant light appeared before him, unlike anything he had ever seen. It wasn't just brightness, it was warmth, understanding, and peace combined into one. The light didn't force itself upon him. It welcomed him, inviting him into a space beyond time and physical existence. At that moment, Pope Gregory realized he was in a state between life and death. He wasn't dreaming, and this wasn't an illusion. He was somewhere beyond human comprehension, where everything felt clearer and more real than the world he had known. It was the beginning of a journey that would take him beyond the teachings of his past and into a truth that had been hidden in plain sight. As he moved toward the light, Pope Gregory felt his earthly concerns fade away. He no longer carried the weight of expectations, religious obligations, or personal struggles. He was pure awareness, experiencing everything with heightened clarity. He sensed a presence guiding him, not in a controlling way, but as a gentle reassurance that he was on the right path. Every step forward felt natural, as if he was returning to a place he had known before, but had long forgotten. The transition was effortless, like stepping through an invisible veil that separated the physical world from something far greater. He realized that beyond this point, there were no human limitations, no past regrets, no future anxieties, only the eternal present. He was surrounded by a love so powerful that it transcended words. It was not a love based on conditions, religious doctrines, or worthiness. It was a love that existed simply because existence itself was sacred. For the first time, Pope Gregory understood that life was not just about faith, it was about experiencing the divine in every moment. He had spent decades trying to understand God through structured teachings, but here, in this realm beyond life, he was experiencing God directly. And in that moment, he knew that he was about to learn something that would redefine everything he had ever believed. The light grew brighter, but it did not hurt his eyes. It felt familiar, like an old friend returning after a long absence. As he gazed into it, he saw something astonishing. Figures emerging from the brilliance, radiating peace and wisdom. Among them stood a presence unlike any other. Pope Gregory's heart recognized it before his mind could comprehend it. It was Jesus, but not in the way he had been depicted in paintings or statues. This was a presence beyond form, beyond human appearance, an energy of pure love and truth. Jesus did not speak with words, yet Pope Gregory understood everything being conveyed. It was as if divine knowledge was being placed directly into his soul. He felt no judgment, no disappointment, only an overwhelming embrace of understanding. He realized that everything he had been seeking, every question, every doubt, was about to be answered. But the answers were not what he had expected. They were more profound, more liberating, and more astonishing than anything he had ever imagined. And then Jesus revealed the truth, a truth so powerful that it would change Pope Gregory's life forever. Pope Gregory stood in awe as the presence of Jesus enveloped him in warmth, unlike anything he had ever felt before. It was not the voice of a man, nor the image of a figure carved in stone. It was pure essence, beyond shape or form. He understood immediately that Jesus was not limited by the human portrayals that had been passed down for centuries. There was no language, no spoken words, yet the message reached directly into his soul. He felt as though he was remembering something he had always known, but had forgotten in his earthly existence. The love radiating from Jesus was overwhelming, filling every part of Pope Gregory's being. It was not the conditional love he had learned about in theological studies, where salvation had to be earned. Instead, it was an unconditional acceptance that did not depend on belief, rituals, or worthiness. In that moment, he realized that no one was ever truly separated from God. No one was ever lost. The idea of rejection, punishment, or eternal condemnation simply did not exist in this realm of divine truth. He felt a deep sorrow for all the years he had spent fearing judgment, for all the people who had been taught to be afraid of God rather than embrace Him. As he stood in this sacred presence, Pope Gregory understood that Jesus had never intended for his message to be distorted by fear or division. What humanity had turned into religious laws and institutions had once been a simple and universal truth. Love is the foundation of existence. There were no barriers, no chosen groups, no exclusivity, only the infinite presence of divine love. Pope Gregory was overcome with emotion, realizing that so many had spent their lives searching for something that had never been lost in the first place. Without speaking, Jesus communicated something even more profound to Pope Gregory. He was shown the journey of humanity, the way spiritual truths had been given, and how over time, interpretations had turned them into rigid systems. Pope Gregory saw how every religion carried pieces of the divine message, but how human fears, egos, and misunderstandings had often reshaped them into something restrictive. He realized that no single belief system held the full truth, yet every sincere seeker was guided in their own way toward it. Jesus revealed that faith was not meant to be about control, rules, or superiority. It was meant to be about experience, an ongoing relationship with the divine that was accessible to everyone, regardless of their background. Pope Gregory saw visions of people from all walks of life, from different cultures and religions, all connected by the same light. He understood that no one was truly excluded from divine grace, and that heaven was not a reward for good behavior, but a return to what had always been. In that moment, Pope Gregory felt a deep peace wash over him. He had spent a lifetime trying to answer the great theological questions, trying to understand what made some people saved and others lost. But now he saw that there was never separation, only different paths leading to the same divine love. Jesus had never intended to create division, only to awaken humanity to the truth of their existence. And now, Pope Gregory knew that this truth needed to be shared. Pope Gregory's heart swelled with emotion as he absorbed the reality of what Jesus had revealed. He saw clearly that love was not bound by religion, doctrine, or ritual. It was the very force that sustained the universe. He was reminded of all the times he had counseled people who lived in fear, worrying whether they had prayed enough, obeyed enough, or belonged to the right faith. Now he saw how unnecessary that fear was. Divine love was not something that had to be earned. It was already within everyone, waiting to be remembered. Jesus showed him moments from history where people had been misled into believing that they had to suffer to be worthy of God's presence. He saw individuals who had been shamed, rejected, or even punished by religious institutions, all because they did not fit into certain doctrines. His heart ached as he realized how many people had walked away from faith entirely, not because they rejected God, but because they could not accept the fear-based teachings they were given. Jesus' message was never about exclusion. It was about showing humanity that they were already loved beyond measure. Pope Gregory knew then that he had a mission. He had to return and share this truth in a way that people could understand. He had to let people know that their worth was not measured by religious laws, but by the love that already existed within them. He saw how different the world could be if people embraced the truth, that they were never separate from God, never unloved, and never beyond redemption. With that realization, he felt a pull, a gentle force guiding him back toward his earthly body. His time in the divine realm was coming to an end, but his work was just beginning. As Pope Gregory drifted between the spiritual realm and his physical body, he was given one final revelation. The purpose of life was not about seeking approval from a higher power, but about becoming a vessel for love. Every person was on a journey of growth, learning, and remembering their divine connection. Mistakes were not sins that condemned people, but lessons that helped them evolve. The trials and hardships of life were not punishments but opportunities to expand in understanding and compassion. He realized that God was not a being sitting in judgment, but a presence flowing through all of creation. The trees, the oceans, the stars, and every human heart carried the essence of the divine. The goal of life was not to be perfect, but to learn how to love, to forgive, and to awaken to the truth of who we are. Pope Gregory saw that those who lived in anger, fear, or hatred were not evil. They were simply lost, disconnected from their true nature. And the only way to heal them was through love, not condemnation. With this final understanding, Pope Gregory felt himself being drawn back into his body. The warmth of the divine realm faded, and the heaviness of physical existence returned. But his heart was no longer burdened with doubt. He had seen the truth. He had spoken with Jesus, and he knew that from this moment on, his life would never be the same. He had to share what he had learned, no matter the cost. He had to let the world know that they were already embraced by divine love, and that the truth was far greater than anything written in books. As Pope Gregory's consciousness returned to his body, he carried with him a profound realization. No one, not a single soul, was ever truly alone. Even in moments of deep despair, when a person feels abandoned by the world, the divine presence remains near. He had felt it in the radiant light, in the warmth of Jesus' presence, and in the interconnectedness of all souls. He now understood that every person was constantly surrounded by divine love, whether they recognized it or not. During his near-death experience, he had seen visions of people at their lowest, those who had suffered tragic losses, those who had been cast out by society, and even those who had lost faith entirely. Yet each of them was still held in the embrace of God. He saw unseen hands guiding them, unseen whispers comforting them, even when they felt nothing but silence. He realized that God did not punish those who doubted, nor did he abandon those who strayed. Instead, he patiently walked beside them, waiting for the moment they would turn toward the love that was always there. Pope Gregory had always believed that faith was something one had to actively maintain, that without belief, a person could be lost. But now he saw the truth. Faith was not about never feeling lost. It was about trusting that even in the darkest times, one was never truly alone. He knew that if people could understand this, they would live without fear, without the burden of guilt, and without the belief that they had to earn their place in God's presence. They already belonged. They always had. One of the most shocking revelations Pope Gregory received was that heaven was nothing like what he had been taught. He had expected golden gates, angelic choirs, and a structured realm where people were divided based on their deeds. Instead, he experienced something far more beautiful, an infinite, living presence of love and understanding that defied human imagination. Heaven was not a physical place, but a state of being, an existence where the soul was fully aware of its divine connection. He saw that souls did not enter heaven because they had followed a particular set of rules or belonged to a specific religion. Instead, they naturally returned to the source of love from which they had come. He witnessed people from all backgrounds, all walks of life, united in the same divine presence, There were no walls, no separations, only a deep sense of belonging. Heaven was not a reward for the righteous. It was the home of every soul, waiting with open arms. What struck Pope Gregory the most was the absence of judgment. He had always believed that souls would stand before God to be judged, yet he saw no such process. Instead, souls were given understanding. They were shown their lives, not with condemnation, but with clarity. They felt the emotions of those they had hurt, but not as punishment, rather as a lesson in love. They saw the ripple effects of their kindness and their mistakes, not to suffer, but to grow. It was a realm of learning, of healing, of returning to the true nature of love. Pope Gregory had always preached about kindness, but now he understood its true power. In his near-death experience, he saw that compassion was not just a virtue, it was a force that shaped reality itself. Every time a person acted with love, it created a wave of healing that spread far beyond what they could see. Even the smallest gestures, a smile, a word of encouragement, a moment of patience, carried energy that touched lives in ways beyond comprehension. He saw how the souls who radiated the most light in the afterlife were not necessarily those who had lived as saints, but those who had lived with sincere kindness. He saw teachers who had inspired their students, parents who had nurtured their children, strangers who had shown unexpected generosity. Their lives were filled with simple acts of love, yet their spirits shone brighter than those who had spent their lives focused only on personal salvation. Jesus showed him that true holiness was not about avoiding mistakes or achieving perfection. It was about choosing love in every moment. A person did not have to be religious to be close to God. They simply had to live with an open heart. Pope Gregory realized that this was the message Jesus had always tried to teach, but over time, it had been buried under doctrines, rules, and fear. Now he knew that if he was given the chance to return, he had to make this truth known to the world. Pope Gregory had reached a place of ultimate peace, where he felt no fear, no pain, only the embrace of divine love. But then he was given a choice. He could stay, or he could return. He was shown what his return would mean, how his testimony would help countless people let go of their fear and rediscover the true nature of faith. He saw people who were suffering, people who felt lost, people who had been taught to believe in a God of judgment rather than a God of love. If he returned, he could help them see the truth. At first, he hesitated. The idea of going back to his aging body, of facing skepticism and resistance, was daunting. He knew that many would reject his experience, that some would dismiss him as delusional. But then, he saw the faces of those who would be touched by his words, those who needed to hear this truth. He saw people finding hope, healing, and peace, and he knew he had to go back. With a deep breath, he surrendered to the decision. The light around him began to fade, and he felt himself being pulled downward, back into his body. The warmth of the divine presence remained, but the weight of the physical world returned. His heart began beating again. His lungs filled with air, and as he opened his eyes, he knew that nothing in his life would ever be the same. Pope Gregory knew that the world was filled with people searching for meaning. Many had turned away from religion because they had been taught a version of God that instilled fear rather than peace. He had seen how faith had been misused to control, to exclude, and to create division rather than unity. But now, he had a message for those who felt lost, those who had been told they were unworthy, and those who longed for a deeper connection with the divine. His message was simple. God was not a distant ruler waiting to punish, but a loving presence always near. He spoke to people from all walks of life, emphasizing that no one was beyond redemption, because redemption was never needed in the first place. Every soul was already loved, already embraced. He explained that heaven was not a reward, but a return to the love that had always existed. And most importantly, he shared that Jesus' true message had always been about unity, not exclusion. Love was the key, not rituals, not doctrines, not religious labels, but love in its purest form. His words resonated with many, yet he also faced resistance. Some within the church were hesitant to accept what he was saying. They clung to their traditions, afraid of what it might mean if they acknowledged that salvation had never been something to be earned, but something that was already given. Pope Gregory understood their fear, but he remained unwavering. He knew that truth could not be forced upon others. It could only be shared with love, and those who were ready would hear it. As Pope Gregory continued to share his near-death experience, discussions began to emerge within the church. Some leaders were intrigued by his revelations, while others dismissed them as personal visions rather than divine truth. He was well aware that institutional change was slow, but he also knew that hearts could be transformed one by one. He did not seek to destroy the church. Rather, he wanted to bring it back to its original purpose, to be a source of love, healing, and spiritual growth. He encouraged others to move away from fear-based teachings and embrace a more compassionate approach to faith. He spoke of a church that welcomed all people, regardless of their past, their beliefs, or their doubts. He urged leaders to stop focusing on judgment and instead focus on helping people recognize their own divine nature. He believed that spirituality should not be about proving one's worthiness, but about remembering that one was never unworthy in the first place. Despite opposition, there were those who listened. Priests, pastors, and everyday believers began questioning the rigid structures that had been in place for centuries. Pope Gregory saw this as the beginning of something new, a movement back to the core truth that Jesus had always taught. It would take time, but he knew that the seeds of change had been planted, and he was willing to spend the rest of his days nurturing them. One of the most profound realizations from Pope Gregory's near-death experience was that love was universal. It was not confined to one faith, one nation, or one group of people. He had seen souls from all walks of life in the divine realm, and he knew that no one was excluded from God's love. With this knowledge, he made it his mission to embrace all people, regardless of their background. He spoke not only to Christians but to people of all beliefs, reminding them that divine love was for everyone. He reached out to those who had been cast aside by religious institutions, those who had been told they were not worthy of grace because of their past mistakes or personal struggles. He assured them that they were no less loved than anyone else. He spoke to skeptics and those who had abandoned faith altogether, inviting them to see God not as a figure of judgment, but as a presence of pure, unconditional acceptance. He let people know that they did not need to belong to a specific religion to be connected to the divine. They only needed to open their hearts to love. His words brought comfort to many, yet there were those who resisted the idea that salvation could be this simple. Some clung to the belief that there had to be conditions, that there had to be consequences for those who did not follow specific rules. But Pope Gregory did not argue. He simply continued to share his truth, knowing that those who were ready would hear it in their own time. And he knew that his message was reaching those who needed it most.